So, recently Donald Trump has made this exception where he says, he doesn't want immigration, but now he wants it, especially if it is white people, white Afrikaners. As a matter of fact, he's allowing white South African farmers, giving them a fast track to come into the country. They're claiming that they are victims of, quote, unjust racial discrimination and genocide. As a matter of fact, I'm going to play this before I bring in my next guest. I spoke to Elon Musk about this a year ago. He brought it up on his own. I was surprised. Here it is. South Africa, I mean, look at what happened with apartheid. It seems to me that you should be someone who is more understanding of that, considering where you came from, considering your history.
Yeah. There's a slow white genocide going on in South Africa. Do you care about that?
So that was Elon Musk a year ago saying there was a slow white genocide going on in South Africa and asking me if I care about it. So what is going on here? Is there any truth to that? Is it a racist conspiracy or fear mongering? What is it? So to get to the bottom of this, I wanted to speak to an expert, someone who can actually report on what's going on in South Africa. And that is Simon Allison, the co-founder of the Continent magazine based in Johannesburg. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there, Don.
So when you hear that, and Donald Trump, our president here in the United States, also claiming that, is there a white genocide going on in South Africa? And if not, where is this notion coming from?
Well, Don, if there is a slow genocide of white people going on in South Africa, as Elon Musk claims, it is very, very, very slow. I wrote some statistics down. One, that's the number of farmers that were killed in the last quarter of last year in South Africa. And of course, all this has to do with the alleged persecution and violence against white Afrikaner farmers that is apparently such a scourge in our society that the United States is having to sort of bend all its rules, hire private planes to bring these persecuted people to safety in the United States. And from the perspective of those of us sitting in South Africa, myself as a white South African, it's hard to see this white genocide anywhere. In fact, you could argue that the opposite is true, that even 30 years after the end of apartheid, which was a white supremacist state, it is still very privileged to be a white person in this country.
Why does it seem like South Africa occupies a very special place in the imagination of white supremacists? Why are they so obsessed with South Africa?
Well, I think it's two reasons. The first is that South Africa is the most recent example of a successful, sophisticated white supremacist state. Apartheid only ended in 1994. That was not very long ago, 31 years. That is in my lifetime. It's in most of our lifetimes. We remember what that looks like. And don't give it, we forget so easily that it was a sophisticated state, that it was incredibly technologically adept. It developed nuclear weapons. It had advanced military systems. It was the sort of aspirational model of what a white supremacist state looks like if you are wanting to create similar structures in your own country. That's reason one. Reason two is that so much of the sort of white supremacist philosophy, ideology is based on this idea that, well, white people are victims, that they are being persecuted, that white people are suffering. It's pretty hard to find any evidence of that. One of the few places where white people are getting killed in any kind of numbers is South Africa. But that doesn't mean that they're being killed because they are white people. South Africa has a terrible problem with violent crime that affects people of all races, all genders. And in fact, it disproportionately affects not white people, but black women. But they are not being offered asylum and expedited refugee status in the United States.
Why do you think then, Simon, why would Elon Musk, where would he get that information from? And then and again, he's not alone here, but how would they come up with that notion that there is a white genocide or a slow white genocide or a genocide of white farmers in South Africa?
A few years ago, I spent a bit of time with a online group called Busting the Myth of White Genocide. And they had sort of taken it on themselves to respond online to places where this idea of the white genocide was being propagated. And I asked them this question. I was like, well, where is this concept of a white genocide coming from. It's not supported by statistics. It's not supported by civil society in this country. There really is no evidence for it whatsoever. And their comments were interesting. They said from what they had seen is there was a high degree of overlap between the accounts propagating white genocide narratives and American conservative, pro-Trump, Christian evangelical, white supremacist, that kind of bundle of beliefs. And their sort of thinking was that the narrative is being seeded in the South African information ecosystem by these groups, which of course have a fairly high degree of alignment with your current president, and indeed are the kinds of groups that are certainly enjoying plenty of amplification currently on Elon Musk's social media platform.
Interesting. So perhaps that is why Donald Trump can get in front of a podium and say this in front on microphones and cameras are rolling about South African farmers and that they are somehow being killed and persecuted. He was asked that question just a couple of days ago in the White House. Watch this.
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, we're supposed to have I guess a G20 meeting there or something, but we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of, but it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. And I don't care who they are. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that what's happening is terrible.
Now, listen, there are people being killed and persecuted all over the world, but somehow this one is important to him. Look, Donald Trump often will say things, and there's a kernel of truth in it, right? They call it truthiness, perhaps. But is there a kernel of truth here, or is this one completely fabricated?
The general perception or reaction to this in South Africa has been one of bafflement, because there isn't even a kernel of truth. All economic statistics suggest that actually, white people are thriving in this country. Something like, so I gathered some statistics before the show. White people, on average, are 20 times richer than black people in South Africa. Unemployment rates amongst white people, 9.2%, pretty high. Unemployment rates amongst black people in South Africa, 46.1%. That's according to Stats South Africa. Stellenbosch University did a study recently which showed that 75% of farmland is still in the hands of white farmers. And the white population of this country is only around 7 or 8%. So you can see that these enormous wealth inequalities endure. And sure, you might say, well, that would be a motivation for some kind of violent reaction. But we have not seen that as a society. In fact, the opposite has been true. Nelson Mandela, we all know the name, but we forget what he did. And what he did was he ushered in this, period of incredible reconciliation and forgiveness, which some people have argued has actually gone too far. In fact, the first ever court case trying two individuals for crimes against humanity in association with apartheid got underway in April this year. And that is just trying two individuals. That has been the level of the sort of lack of prosecution for the violence and the crimes associated with apartheid, and is indicative as a whole of the fact that there's been pretty much no kind of retribution, no kind of racial violence enacted against white people. And of course, while we're talking about all the racial violence that is supposedly happening against white people, we're conveniently forgetting South Africa's very dark history of centuries of racial violence being committed by white people.
Simon and everyone, stand by. We want to get to this break from our sponsor. Support from the Don Lemon Show today comes from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Our founding fathers meant for us to have what? a separation of church and state. But there are people who are not wanting that now, and they are pushing for a theocracy when we're not supposed to be a theocracy. And let me put it to you in a way that you might understand it. Have you ever been on a road trip where one person insists on controlling the music? You're just trying to enjoy the ride, but no, you're stuck listening to whatever they want to hear. Nothing that is your favorite band. No discussion, no compromises, just their way or the highway. Well, that's kind of what's happening with Christian nationalism right now. They're trying to control everything. Some folks want to take over the wheel and they want to force everyone to follow their beliefs, shoving religion into our laws, our schools, and even our personal choices. But hey, this country was built, as I said, for everyone to be free. It was built for everyone, not just one group. And that's where the Freedom from Religion Foundation comes in. Think of them as the GPS, keeping church and state in separate lanes, just like the founders actually intended. So whether you've always been secular or you left religion behind, if you don't want someone else who is dictating your trip for you, here's what you do. FFRF has your back. So join us. Go to ffrf.us/freedom or text my name, D-O-N, Don, to 511-511 and become a member today. Text Don to 511-511, or you can go to ffrf.us/freedom. Because when it comes to freedom, we all deserve to choose our own route. For membership information, text Don to 511-511 today. Text fees may apply. Support from today's show also comes from, guess what? A product that I really love. It helps me to be healthier, and that is from 120 Life. Did you know that your blood pressure is the number one risk factor for mortality? And you know what that does? 1 in 2 adults has it. That is a 50-50 chance for you to becoming a walking time bomb, and that you're maybe a walking time bomb right now. But here's the good news. You can take control of your blood pressure naturally without relying on Big Pharma. 120 Life is a blend of great tasting superfruit juices that have been shown to actually help lower your blood pressure. I'm telling you, it's really tasty. It has helped me. It's actually helped me to become calmer and more confident about where my blood pressure is, and also my blood sugar levels as well. So it's not just for high blood pressure. It's beneficial for health conditions as well, like diabetes. So 120 Life is trusted by health care professionals, with hundreds of doctors recommending it to help manage blood pressure naturally. So for a limited time, here's what you can do, okay? Try 120 Life and save 20% off. Just use the code DON, D-O-N, at checkout at 120life.com. 120 Life offers a risk-free trial with a full refund if you don't see lower numbers in 2 weeks. So what do you have to lose? It is your money-back guarantee, risk-free, if you don't see lower blood levels in 2 weeks, or lower blood sugar levels, and et cetera, in 2 weeks. So go to 120life.com and use the code DON to save, okay? You can save 20%. There's nothing to lose except your high blood pressure numbers. Go to 120life.com and use the code DON to save 20% off. Remember, you must use the code DON to get this special offer. This is serious. This is your life we're talking about. 120 Life can help. So we're back now with Simon Allison, who is the co-founder of the Continent magazine based in Johannesburg. And we're talking about this whole idea of a white genocide in South Africa, and why white people, white farmers especially, are being offered a path to citizenship, an express path to citizenship here in the United States. Do you think Donald Trump came up with this idea of his own, or do you think folks around him in the White House are somehow possibly feeding this to him, Simon?
I think this has been building for a while. And I certainly know that far-right groups within South Africa have been meeting with various representatives of the Republican Party and sort of other elements of the MAGA crowd for several years, potentially laying the seeds for this kind of policy. But, from our perspective, it all feels like this is more of an American issue than it is a South African issue. It's clearly not true. And we're trying to figure out why exactly it is occupying such a central space in the American politics of the moment. And it's hard to reach any other conclusion than that your country's being run by racists, or at least a significant chunk of policy is being crafted that way.
People don't like to hear that. MAGA is not racist. Why are you calling America? Half of Americans are racist, and or if you're someone like me, obviously I am black. If you bring that up, then you're somehow race baiting. I don't know if you can explain that American phenomenon there, and perhaps it's the same way in South Africa among these groups.
I don't know what it's like in America, but I can say that South Africa has a lot of experience of racial segregation and a lot of recent experience of racial segregation. In this country, it's called apartheid, and it was very recent. That means that we consider ourselves pretty uniquely qualified to spot the signs of it happening elsewhere. There's no accident that South Africa has been leading the charges of genocide against Israel at the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. That's because for many years, South African leaders have been saying, hey, what's happening in Israel, Palestine, that reminds us of apartheid. We know what that looks like. Our alarm bells are ringing. And I think that we are seeing, those same alarm bells are starting to ring now with some of the policies that we are seeing coming out of the United States. This being an obvious example, making up a genocide against white people, fast tracking a bunch of white farmers, providing a private plane for them to come to America. This is crazy stuff. Similarly, the attacks on DEI, the erasure of sort of black achievements and people from various positions of power and websites and all that kind of thing. It really feels scarily like the United States is ushering in or elements within that government are trying to usher in a very disturbing politics that looks all too familiar to South Africans who lived through apartheid.
Are you saying that America is ushering in its own version of apartheid?
Not yet, but certainly there are warning signs. And I think it's something that Americans should be very, very concerned with. The attacks on DEI in particular seem to represent, an attack on the idea that that there have been any injustices historically in America's past that need to be atoned for. And that's certainly, you see that narrative today in South Africa, where you see these very fringe, white, radical, far-right groups portraying themselves as the victims, despite the huge economic inequalities in their favor, despite the lack of evidence, and a total erasure of the history of what came before, and the erasure of the reasons that things like affirmative action in South Africa, we have black economic empowerment, why those policies have to happen in societies where injustice has been perpetrated for centuries by governments against minority groups, in this country against the majority group. And yes, there have to be policies to address that.
So I want you to explain, because the argument is and will be, they are taking land from these farmers and it's their land. Can you please explain what's going on and talk about the Expropriation Act? What is it?
So, the land issue is a vexed one in this country and in many countries. Who owns the land? Who has the historic right to the land? These are very, very difficult questions. I've done a lot of reporting on, places in Johannesburg, this beautiful large city that I live, huge suburbs built on land that was confiscated from the people that lived there under very dubious circumstances. Now, should that land be returned? Some of those cases are before the court. On the subject of farms, it has always been a goal of the South African government to bring more farmland under black control, because it has been under black ownership, because most of it has for so long been under white ownership. But the reason that process has been so slow, incredibly slow, just a few years ago, only 10% of South African farmland was owned by black farmers. That's up to 25% today. But the reason it's been so slow is because the policy is predicated on the concept of willing buyer, willing seller. So there needs to be someone ready to sell their farm and the government ready to step in to buy it.
So they're not just going and yanking people's land and taking it away.
No, that is not happening.
But that's a narrative. You would think that they're just
It's
coming in
not a
and
narrative,
confiscating.
Don. It's a lie. The
Go on.
Expropriation Act, which is being introduced now, actually is nothing to do with this idea of land grabs. It's actually bringing South African law into line with international best practice. Um, Most countries have a similar law allowing governments to, in the case of needing to build a highway, well, there are mechanisms you can use to get the land you need to build that highway, and there are mechanisms of compensation that are part of that. That's all this act does.
We
And
call it
all
eminent domain here in the United States.
Exactly. So that is what we're introducing, and it's part of a long process of updating South African legislation. Um, and that's where we are. I will say the name is unfortunate. They could have chosen a better name for the law, but that is all the law actually is. And this idea that farms are being taken without compensation, just it isn't happening.
Stand by, Simon. I'm going to get to another word from our sponsors. Support for the Don Lemon Show today comes from Beam. Let me tell you about my sleep experience and how Beam helped me with. It's a powder drink, right, that you mix up, and I'm going to tell you about it. It is, I've been having trouble sleeping because I had so much on my mind, family issues, work issues, all kinds of issues that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And you've got to be refreshed in order to deal with those issues. I found myself tired all the time. I was scattered, and I didn't want to take a narcotic, take a sleeping pill, because then you have that hangover. And so then I got this product called Beam, and it has helped me tremendously. And here's what you have to do though. You don't not only have to be refreshed so that you can take care of your personal and your professional business, but also what's going on in the world right now, because they are throwing a lot of stuff at us. The right is trying to get us to be tired so that we don't fight back, that we don't stand up, that we are just worn out. Well, that's where you can turn to Beam. And that's why I turned to Beam. It's Dream Powder. It's a natural sleep blend designed to help you get the deep restorative rest your body and mind need to stay in the fight. Because here's the truth. You cannot sustain the fight without rest. Burnout serves the people in power who love nothing more than to what? See you exhausted and checked out. So it is good for you. It has all kinds of vitamins and minerals. It's got magnesium. It has got reishi, melatonin to help you sleep. I took it the first time and I was out like a light within 15 or 20 minutes. So it was great. And so I have continued to use it. I trust this product, and it is, trust me, it's very good for you. So since I started using Dream, my focus came back, my energy returned. I'm ready to face the day, ready to stand up for things that matter. So it all improved with this Dream Powder. So here's what you need to do. Right now, Beam is offering up to 40% off. 40% off of their best-selling Dream Powder just for my listeners, just for you, okay? It's a limited time offer, and it's a perfect way to overcome that exhaustion and stay in the fight every single day. Go to shopbeam.com. Use the code LEMON, LEMON. Go to shop, SHOPBEAM.com/lemon, and use the code LEMON for up to 40% off. You cannot beat that. Sleep well, wake up ready. The fight continues, everyone. And support for today's show also comes from Wild Alaskan. Okay, so let me tell you about Wild Alaskan. I love fish, and I've always shopping for fish, but I'm always concerned about too much mercury, too many chemicals, all of the pollutants and stuff in the ocean and in the waters and in the lakes and everything. And so I found out about this Wild Alaskan, and I no longer have to worry about that. They are the trusted seafood place of choice for me, and it should be for you. I used to question everything from nutrition to taste and sustainability until I discovered Wild Alaskan Company. So Wild Alaskan Company is the best way to get wild caught, perfectly proportioned, nutrient-dense seafood delivered directly to your door. You don't have to go shopping for it. Trust me, you haven't tasted fish this good, okay? So it's 100% wild caught, never farmed. This means there are no antibiotics, no GMOs, no additives, just clean, real fish that support healthy oceans and fishing communities. As I said, it's nutrient rich. It's frozen right off the boat, so it locks in the taste. It tastes fresh whenever I get it. It's very fresh, okay? So here's what you need to do. You can try this. Go to wildalaskan.com/lemon. Okay. wildalaskan.com/lemon. You have to use the lemon, right, in order to get the discount. If you're not completely satisfied with your first box, Wild Alaskan Company will give you a full refund. No questions asked, no risk, just high quality seafood. Go to wildalaskan.com/lemon for $35 off of your first box of premium wild caught seafood. That's wildalaskan.com/lemon for $35 off your first order. So thanks to Wild Alaskan Company for sponsoring this episode. So we're back. Simon, I want to play something for you. This is Peter Kreelorg, and he is South African, and he has a message, and I want you to respond to it. A message for the Afrikaners who chose to come here to the United States on that private plane and be a part of the little Donald Trump show and tell that happened. Here it is.
To the 50 Afrikaners who fled to the US, calling themselves refugees, you are not refugees. You are just a case study of white flight dressed up as martyrdom. You're not escaping violence, you're escaping equality. South Africa didn't chase you away. You ran. Yes, South Africa is one of the most violent countries in the world. Yes, brutality exists. But let's be honest, violence affects all communities, not just white farmers. Black, colored, Indian, and yes, white people are all targets of a national crime crisis. What we have is a breakdown in safety, not a white genocide. This is not ethnic cleansing, it's criminal collapse, and running to the US won't fix it. You are part of a 7% minority, but somehow still manages to control over 70% of the wealth. That is not persecution, that's privilege on a guilt trip. And let's be real, if we tried to relocate just half of the Afrikaans population, it would take decades, billions in logistics, and you'd still end up culturally homeless in a country that don't want your apartheid baggage. You're not brave, you're not victims. You're scared of a world where you don't get to be in charge, and that makes the rest of the Afrikaans community cringe, because you make us look weak. South Africa is broken, and it's our problem to solve. So if you don't have the spine to do so, stay gone.
What do you think? Is he right?
Spot on. I couldn't have said it better myself. You know, it is fascinating, and I think it is this thing of us forgetting our history, or choosing to forget our history, that some white people, and sure it is a minority, feel that the odds are stacked against them in the current dispensation. And I think it stems from having the odds stacked in your favor for so long, that when the playing field is level, suddenly it feels really hard. And
feels like discrimination.
You know? It's a realization that is very difficult on a personal level, on a family level. People, who didn't ever have to worry about jobs for their children are now having to worry about jobs for their children in a way they never had to before. And they're perceiving that, again, a small minority, as persecution, when it is just life. Sometimes life is hard.
How has this refugee program impacted South African politics? I mean, even and maybe daily life. Or folks, does it have an impact there? And I'm sure people are discussing it.
Not yet. It hasn't really had an impact. It's almost been perceived more as a joke more than anything else, because we don't really have any tools to respond to something that just isn't happening. There's been a lot of, humor on social media about it. And I think that that's fine for now, but my worry is that this could go further in terms of policies designed to hurt South Africa based on this myth. So sure, accepting a few refugees, that does nothing. But if the White House starts thinking about punitive trade measures because they want to punish us for this white genocide, that could have a really serious impact on South African livelihoods and lives and health programs and employment opportunities, all of those things. And if that starts happening, that's going to have a real political impact. And I don't know what that impact will be, but I'm sure it's not going to be great.
But that is something that not the majority of the population is not thinking that way now. But I'm sure there are some folks who are thinking, where will this lead? Will this have an economic impact on South Africa?
Absolutely. I mean, it is an issue that is exercising our government They are extremely worried about where this might go. Next week, Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, is due to visit Washington, D.C. He's going to meet with Donald Trump. And I think that meeting could be very seminal in terms of where South Africa goes for the next 5 or 10 years. Because if it goes badly, then who knows what other sort of measures might be taken against us.
Simon Allison, the co-founder of the Content magazine based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and here giving us the real truth on what's happening here. Simon says there's no white genocide, slow or fast, happening in South Africa right now. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks everyone for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate your love and your support, and we will see you next time.